Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to talk about Bel'Veth yet again. Yes, I know I've made a bunch of videos already about Bel'Veth, but I kind of wanted to talk about her a little bit more because I wanted to talk this time about Bel'Veth's kit. Now, I know I have a series where I talk about a champion's kit from a mechanical perspective and a design perspective to try and give a sense for how well designed the character's kit is, how well it functions within itself, irrespective of things like gameplay balance or thematics and that kind of a thing, right? The whole point is just, is the character's kit well designed? And normally, I don't do this for brand new champions because it feels a little inaccurate to try and take a look at them this early on. We don't really even know that much about the character, we haven't probably played as the character, and generally it's going to take a lot of time for the character to settle down following their release. We are going to play more games on Bel'Veth on day one of her launch than Riot will have played with her in the entirety of her existence, which is a big deal, right? But I wanted to talk about Bel'Veth right now and give a couple of my thoughts as to why I just think that Bel'Veth's kit is not very well designed. Now, Bel'Veth, if you've already seen, I've done an entire video breaking down the individual buttons that Bel'Veth has, and she does have some fun sort of mechanical synergies in her kit as is. I'm not going to disagree with that. There are some things that I think Bel'Veth does well, but I think that there are a lot more that makes it... I really get the sense that Bel'Veth's kit did not start out this way. I really get the sense of that. And I think nowhere is this better indicated than Bel'Veth's Ultimate, which has a lot of problems of its own, but we'll get to that sort of in a bit. The biggest thing I think I have with Bel'Veth is that Bel'Veth is intended to be a skirmisher, which, for those of you who are not familiar with those terminology, a skirmisher is intended to be a champion that has high target agnostic damage. Anything a skirmisher hits should be feeling pain, squishies and tanks alike, but these skirmishers have very limited defensive tools to keep them alive, and they tend to not have extremely good target access. I'm talking, of course, about champions like Fiora, or champions like Master Yi, or champions like Lilia, or even Kled, I think, to a certain extent, could be considered a skirmisher. But those champions, right, have very specific windows in which they are strong, and they have high damage output, but they have to be very, very careful whenever they go for fights, because if they play it poorly, they do not have the ability to get out. And especially some of these champions can have difficulties getting in, right? Lilia has to stack up her passive to get enough movement speed, and even all she's getting is movement speed, right? The only thing Lilia can do is just walk at you. That's it. Master Yi has movement speed and has Alpha Strike, but he, again, is just kind of running at you. Fiora, very low range dash. There's not an easy way for her to get in. And I think Bel'Veth falls into these categories. Now, the key with skirmishers is that generally they are very high skill cap champions. You need to be a fairly good player to properly manage your survivability buttons, right? Your defensive tools, alongside maximizing your damage output and finding your perfect window to go in, right? There's a lot that I think goes into a skirmisher being a good pick and being good on a skirmisher. I don't think they're the kind of champion that you can just kind of go out and do whatever you want with, sort of like Juggernauts, right? I think Juggernauts are a class of champion that you can just kind of do whatever you want on. It almost doesn't matter, versus the skirmisher, which you have to be quite good on. Bel'Veth, I think the issue I have is that Bel'Veth's kit design does not lend itself very well towards that kind of playstyle. Bel'Veth is a very stat-checky champion. She kind of says, all I do is auto-attack you, and if you do not have the DPS to kill me before I kill you, then you cannot fight me, because there is no way to outplay Bel'Veth, right? If you look at her kit, she has a defensive tool in her E that can kind of help keep her alive. She has a defensive tool in her W, which again is sort of a disruption tool. You're going to use that more often than not to keep someone at bay or to disrupt an enemy as they try to go for like a big skill shot, or maybe to keep them in range for you to continue auto-attacking. But you're really not, those really aren't the core of Bel'Veth's damage. Bel'Veth's damage is entirely auto-attack. It's dashing around and auto-attacking people, and not even really dashing, because the dashing is actually a DPS drop. All Bel'Veth wants to do, literally, all she wants to do is sit there and right-click you. And she is enabled to do this based on her kit design, right? She's sort of just, that kit basically says all you want to do on this character is auto-attack. That's it. That's the character design. And in that regard, Bel'Veth is very similar to Master Yi. And Master Yi, I think, is another character who is very polarizing for a multitude of reasons, but number one of which is that Master Yi is another very stat-checky type champion. He very much so is just about right-clicking you, and all he really asks to do is just sit there and auto-attack, and you just kind of die to it, and you don't really have a way to outplay them, right? Auto-attacks are the most reliable source of damage in the game. You cannot outplay auto-attacks, period, and Master Yi and Bel'Veth both are just sitting there whacking you with extremely reliable damage that you have no option of dealing with and killing you from there. Which just means that if you know the Bel'Veth is underfed, you can fight her, and you guaranteed can fight her because she doesn't have any way of maximizing her damage potential. Same with Master Yi, right? If you're ahead, you can just kind of fight them, and it doesn't matter because there's nothing they can do to optimize that encounter. Similarly, if they're ahead of you, there's nothing you can do to somehow find a way to edge out of this competition because they're just going to kill you. And Master Yi, even, I think, is a better designed skirmisher than Bel'Veth, because at least Master Yi has windows of power that are more relevant than Bel'Veth. Right, he has a very short duration on Wuju style, which gives him the true damage. He has only a 4-second timer on Highlander, which if he's not able to get anything done or get a reset within that time limit, it's going to wear off and he's going to be down a very large steroid, right? There's actual windows of power that Master Yi has to somewhat manage. Bel'Veth's true form lasts a full minute. That's assuming she didn't get a Rift Herald or Baron, then it lasts 3 minutes. There's no real way to meaningfully outplay that, especially when you consider that Bel'Veth also isn't manaless, which means that if Bel'Veth has any degree of sustain and can solo an objective like Dragon, which a lot of times these skirmishers can do, you don't have the ability to do anything, because she's going to kill the dragon, she's going to consume the void coral, and then she's going to go look to fight you, and that's a minute cooldown, right? There's no way in which you are going to be able to somehow survive that amount of time, right? And so in that regard, I just feel like Bel'Veth's kit is not interesting to play against, right? There is no way to deal with her. She just kind of walks in and says, okay, cool. Can you fight me? No? Well, you can't outplay me either, so I'm just going to beat you from here. And part of the issue, I think, as well, now we finally get to, I think, one of the biggest problems I have with Bel'Veth, and potentially indicative of a problem that Bel'Veth's designers ran into during her prototyping, in that Bel'Veth's ultimate is, I think, the worst designed ability I have ever seen in League of Legends. Primarily, Bel'Veth's ultimate is bad because it is a passive. You should not be allowed to activate Bel'Veth's ult, because there's no reason to, right? The Void Coral is something that you should have just been able to right-click in order to consume it, right? Because if you think about this, what's another champion that we've had where if you kill somebody, they leave behind something that you can basically activate an ability on to do a thing, right? Viego. And Viego doesn't have to press a button to consume the soul, right? It's literally just a right-click. All Viego has to do is put his mouse on the soul of the champion that he just killed and right-click, and he becomes that champion. And so there's no reason why Bel'Veth should have to activate her ability to consume the Void Coral. There just isn't. And I think the only reason that it's that's the way it works is because Riot said we don't want to have an ability, a champion ability, that is a passive, right? They've moved away from that quite a bit over the last few years. You don't really see champions with an ability like Vayne Silver Bolts or Cho'Gath's Vorpal Spikes or those kinds of abilities. We don't see those anymore because it doesn't feel great to play as when you realize you're just down a full button. Even if those abilities are numerically very powerful, it's the same reason why Riot moved away from auras. In that auras are very strong, but also very unappreciable. Things like Vayne Silver Bolts or Varus' Blighted Quiver are very powerful, but also very unappreciable, and it does feel like you just don't have an extra button versus everybody else. And those are all basic abilities. Imagine if you had an ultimate ability that is literally a passive. There is nothing you can do with your ultimate. You do not get to press R and do the big play because it's a passive. All the value it gives you is passive. But that's exactly what Bel'Veth's ult is. There is nothing about Bel'Veth ultimate that actually has like a timing that needs to be worried about or an important cooldown. It literally is just there. And Bel'Veth, I guess, gets to right-click Void Coral and pop off from there. There's no reason that ability should be activated. Furthermore, there's no reason this ability should have the Voidling passive. I really don't think that belongs on the Champion's Kit at all. I guess you're sort of saying, okay, Bel'Veth, you're going to kill a Herald or kill another objective focus monster, and then you're going to also have better pushing to make better use of that objective. But it just doesn't make sense with the character kit, right? Bel'Veth is all about auto-attacking you, And that has nothing to do with auto-attacking. That's just generically gives Bel'Veth extra power in a way that isn't even that fun for Bel'Veth, because she can't manipulate these minions at all. All they do is just run down a lane. It'd be like if Yorick could spawn his Mistwalkers, but he couldn't control them at all. Cool, it might be powerful, but also not being able to control them just means that it's sort of generic power that I guess gets added to the champion's kit. And I think because of this ability, and especially because of the sort of comments that Riot made in their season start video where they were talking about Bel'Veth and sort of hinting that she was going to be this brood mother, swarm lord type character, right? That was sort of their indication, the things they were talking about with Bel'Veth, is they were like, okay, Bel'Veth is this kind of character. Bel'Veth is supposed to be about this, summoning void creatures, and that's not the kit we got at all. And I think this, in conjunction with the sort of passive component of her ultimate, because the entire ultimate is passive, but that particular passive component of her ultimate, I think the reason it exists is because Riot were trying to make Bel'Veth into a Swarm Lord type character. They really wanted to make Bel'Veth a Minion Mancer, if you kind of get my parlance here. And Riot have historically had problems with making Minion Mancer type characters because of how difficult it can be to balance them. Some Minion Mancers, right, if you do it too well, then it's going to feel like there's not enough counterplay to them, right? You're going to show up and this character spawns a million dudes that all do the work for them that you have to kill, but they're not easy to kill, and they have a lot of health and they do a lot of damage, and it's frustrating to deal with. But if they're too weak, then they feel irrelevant to that champion, right? You have these Spiderlings as Elise, but whether or not you have them is irrelevant. That has no bearing on your power whatsoever, that you don't feel like they're appreciated at all. They're just sort of an added thing that you have, I guess. And that is a very difficult divide for Riot to walk. Historically, we've had very many attempts at Minion Mancing champions, Heimerdinger, Elise, Zyra, and none of them have really ever passed muster. I think Yorick is the closest we've gotten to a good, well-designed Minion Mancer. And Bel'Veth, I think, started life as a Minion Mancer, and Riot could not get that design to work. For whatever reason, they couldn't find a way to make it work, and they basically last minute said, what can we do that's relatively easy for us to slap together? On-hit builds, auto-attacking builds, basically saying, Bel'Veth, you are now all about auto-attacking, and we're not going to worry about the Minion Mancer kit at all because we have to get this champion shipped. And I honestly think that's the case, because even if you look at Bel'Veth from a thematic perspective, Bel'Veth is all imperiousness, right? She's the Empress of the Void. She's the kind of character that you wouldn't consider to get her hands dirty, right? Who summons creatures to do it for her, and if she's getting herself involved, it's going to be quick and it's going to be bloody. But that's not what we got, right? What we got instead is a slappy Stingray, and the only reason I can think of for why that is the case is basically that Riot tried the Minion Mancer deal and couldn't get it to work. But those are my thoughts on Bel'Veth. I think her kit design is just extremely disappointing, especially for our first true Voidborn champion in quite some time. But you guys let me know what you think of her down in the comment section below. If you really like her design, if you played her and think that there is a little bit more to her kit than I'm making it out to be, go ahead and let me know all that down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload it every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.